Joining me now is J.B. Hixson. He's an author on several books related to the Antichrist. And also joining me is Pastor Brandon Holthaus. He is out of Bakersfield, California, Rock Harbor Church. I've spoken for his church many times, several times on a Sunday morning. And his ministry since then has blown up. I mean, it is really taken off. Wow. My high school math teacher texted me today, said, you should have on Brandon Holthaus. And I said, I actually have him on the broadcast tonight already. So there you go. Brandon, JB, welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. And we'll be promoting your ministries and your websites under your name as we get going here. But I wanted to have you guys on to talk about 2025 and where you see things going 2026 as the stage seems to be being set for the unfolding of Bible prophecy. Now, I don't know where you guys stand on this. We can all agree to disagree because we agree on so much. But I think President Trump has done some great things, but I think he is really squandering some major, major opportunities. And what I'm seeing is basically the Hegelian dialectic, thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, fight, fight, fight. And then the change comes from all the turmoil and conflict. But also you end up with people being demoralized. We know that the Hegelian dialectic process is a big part of communism. It was a big part of communism. Dialectical materialism, obviously, part of communism. So without using a lot of big words and having the audience's eyes roll back in their head and be bored out of their mind, I basically want to tell you folks, you're going through a psychological operation, okay? They gave you Barack Obama, 8 years of Barack Obama, and that was fundamental transformation, right? And then they gave you Donald Trump, and we thought, whoo, a guy's going to save the country. And he did a pretty good job in his first term. I was pretty excited about a lot of what he did in the first term. Then we get, I think, the election stolen. I think they want us to know the election was stolen. They can gaslight people. And they give you Joe Biden, who campaigned from his basement. And he, of course, gave his red light speech that MAGA and Christians are a fundamental threat to the country. It's white Christian males and patriots. And the borders are open and you let in all the Chinese military-aged males and all kinds of other jihadi and terrorists are into the country. And then you get Donald Trump. And you notice this thesis, antithesis, you know, the conflict and then some calm, conflict and then some calm. I mean, it's right out of the Tavistock Institute playbook. But now we're to a point where it's also a demoralization. We don't see change like we need to preserve the republic. We have people that are very frustrated. This week we get a Vanity Fair piece that's showing Susie Wiles, I can't control him kind of thing. And people are trying to make excuses for it, but apparently it's on recording. And they're like, hey, we got the receipts. Do you want to really say this? And then you've got the comments by President Trump about Rob Reiner's family. I know that Rob Reiner had some things to say about Donald Trump. They weren't very flattering, but it's like, wait a minute, there's a time and a place. And then you have President Trump saying so many things over the last few weeks. 600,000 Chi-Com students got to come in here to prop up these schools. Really, why? We've got to get HB1 visas to foreigners to come in here and take, entry-level jobs. Why? We're going to let Qatar build a military base or have a base on a military base in Idaho. Why? And now people are starting to realize, particularly after last night's speech, which we didn't carry because we said it's going to be a lot of talk. And I don't think it's going to be anything but how great the economy is, try to convince you how great the economy is, while we see our own government now buying $9 trillion of its own debt because nobody else seems to want it. And we are going to have more inflation, so he can tell us all day long how inflation is down. I don't believe it. The CPI numbers have been rigged for decades, and it's about to go much, much higher, which is why silver's at over $65 an ounce. And so I said, I'm not carrying that because I'm interested in action, not talk. And yet now we see more and more people being disillusioned. The Republicans can't fix it. The Democrats can't fix it. The MAGA coalition is now falling apart. Anti-Semitism is rising. There's a war on Christians, a war on Jews. A 19-year-old Christian at Brown University is apparently shot at close range. And what it's doing, I believe, guys, and it's happening on a global scale, 10,000 farmers in the EU flooding with their tractors today outside the parliament. And I think what's happening with massive debt from central banks around the world, people not happy, politicians not having solutions. The leader of Australia comes out and he says the solution to the Islamists is going to be to crack down on pastors and free speech. I'll play the clip. And hate speech, right? And I say all that to say, well, that's very discouraging. But I look at it and I say, well, what would have to happen for us to go to world government? What would have to happen for us to go where we have 10 world leaders who then eventually give their power to an Antichrist figure who shows up performing counterfeit miracles, signs, and wonders to validate that he's not like a normal politician, because those guys are all talk. I can actually do things. Watch this. To validate his message, right? Copying Christ, who did miracles, not to put on a magic show, but to validate the authority of who he was, right? And so here comes the Antichrist performing counterfeit miracles, signs, and wonders to say, I'm not like all these other guys. They've talked a lot. I'm a doer. Let me show you what I can do. And so I have to say, do you believe that what's happening economically, wars, maybe one in our hemisphere coming soon with Russia and Iran and China and Hezbollah right in our backyard in Venezuela, the currency collapses around the world, the lack of solutions, the rise of Islam. Brandon, don't you think this is preparing the way for Bible prophecy and the Antichrist, which JB's written a 2-part book series on?
Man, if it's not, then I'm crazy, man, because everything's laying out perfectly, prophetically. Every piece of the puzzle is getting in place. Everything you mentioned sets the stage, man. I mean, you think about, for instance, this economy that you mentioned. We call it a K economy because the stock market keeps going up, but jobs keep going down. And you have AI, and Trump did this whole AI thing. To where it's destroying jobs. The automation is just taking jobs away. So you have the K model economy going up with the stock market, but then jobs are going down. Dude, that's heading the path right to Revelation chapter 6, a quarter wheat for a day's wages. And what didn't Yuval Harari said? What are we going to do with all these people that can't work and don't have jobs? Well, we'll give them video games and drugs. And that's what we'll do with these useless people.
And what did Trump just do with pot today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Good point.
He signed an executive order bringing it down to level 3.
Sure, you got to have the drugs when they're not going to work. So, and then at the same time, I don't understand what he's doing with the Middle East. I don't understand these kowtow to Qatar, who's the major funder of terrorism around the world, and Saudi Arabia, and bringing in Julani or whatever his name is, Shara or whatever his name is, to the White House, and being friends with Turkey. I mean, are you setting up the whole Middle East to come against Israel like predicted? I mean, it's just amazing to watch this, Brandon. And I think it's rapidly accelerating. That's what my takeaway with all of this is, how fast things are developing and nothing's stopping it.
Oh, great analysis, Pastor. And what do you think, JB? I mean, you wrote a 2-book series on the Antichrist I've interviewed you about. People can find it. Tell our audience what's the name of it so they can get a copy, the two-part series. But is this all setting the stage for people to say, isn't it Henry Spank or whatever his name was in the Common Market? Something I've been quoting since 1990 in my first book. He said, we don't need another committee. We have too many committees already. What we need is a man of sufficient stature to hold the allegiance of the people and to lift us out of the economic morass into which we're sinking. Send us such a man, and be he God or devil, will receive him. Isn't that where we're at now? Trump can't fix the problems. None of these guys can fix the problems. We need a man of sufficient stature, be he God or devil, will receive him.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what Curtis Yarvin and the Dark Enlightenment folks are trying to do. They're trying to install a techno monarch. My friend Patrick Wood has written about that. He's been way out front on that for years and years and years. But yeah, absolutely. This is all happening right before our very eyes. No surprise, obviously, for those who know the Bible and know Bible prophecy. But you mentioned something earlier about the Hegelian dialectic, and that goes back way before Friedrich Hegel, even in the Middle Ages to Machiavelli. It's a common tool of the enemy, controlled opposition to get people thinking they have a voice when in reality nothing ever changes. As you mentioned, some good things and frankly more good things tend to happen when a conservative is in power, and more bad things tend to happen, at least overtly on the surface, when a liberal progressive is in power. But the big picture never changes. It was a Reagan-appointed Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy who cast the deciding vote in the 2015 landmark gay marriage case. John Roberts, appointed by George W. Bush, originally dissented, but since then has just doubled down on support of gay marriage. It was a Republican nominated justice that gave us Obamacare. So, I mean, it's a big head fake when we think somehow, if we can just get conservatives in power, we can turn this thing around. Obviously, from a moral perspective and an ideological perspective, we want to promote right-wing conservative viewpoints. But I think the biggest thing that this year has taught us so far is that just because we have a conservative in office does not mean that the enemy is going to slow down, stop, or press pause. I think particularly in the area of the burgeoning technocracy. By the way, you mentioned my Spirit of the Antichrist series. It's actually a trilogy, 3 volumes, and the 3rd volume was all about the burgeoning technocracy. And so that came out in 23. But yeah, the Stargate thing, within 24 hours of inauguration, he had Larry Ellison in the Oval along with Sam Altman and some other technocrats, promoting the Stargate and funding the Stargate mission. More recently, he's got the Genesis mission, which is sort of hailed as America's AI action plan, but it's never about what it's about. Always remember that principle. It's never about what it's about. So I think there are some things happening that are being promoted as good for America, but in reality, they seem to be paving the way for the beast system that we read about in Revelation.
100%. I think we're all in agreement. So do you believe that what Donald Trump is laying down, and this is what Leo Holman and I said before he was elected, we said, look, if the globalists let him in, because I think they can rig elections, I think we all know that. If they let him in, is that because they need him to sell to the American people what Kamala Harris cannot sell to the American people? And that Donald Trump will come in as a salesman to sell us AI, data centers, central bank digital currencies, cryptocurrency, stable coins. And that seems to be exactly what's happening. So is Donald Trump laying down the system that you believe, I don't think it's the Antichrist beast system now, but do you believe this is what's being built, what will eventually be the Antichrist beast system, JB?
I do. I mean, I think clearly the infrastructure is there. It's been building up for quite some time, and some of the final pieces of the puzzle are being put in place now. I liken it this time of year to putting out your Christmas lights. You put them out in your front yard on some bushes and on some railings across the front porch, and you test them out before you put them in. But eventually, when you get everything in place, you kind of plug them all into one power strip so that you can push one button and they all come on. And I think that's what they're doing now with all these different digital currencies and digital ID systems and tracking and hacking systems. But yeah, it's definitely unfolding quite before our eyes. As far as Donald Trump, I mean, obviously, he was better than the alternative in a variety of ways, no question about that. But I struggle to know sometimes whether he's the cart, the horse, or just taking a ride. I don't even know if he knows sometimes, because he does some good things, but also he seems at the very least to be a pawn in the hands of the technocrats for sure. Mm-hmm.
So, Pastor, you have a church. I've had the privilege of speaking at your church there in California. Yeah. And so tell me, as a pastor, and we have our Sunday night church service. I just taught through the book of Revelation verse by verse for a year and a half. Just did a 4-hour series on why I'm a Christian Zionist. I'm planning on teaching through the book of Daniel in the new year. So we're all concerned about religious liberty and freedom and what churches can and cannot do and Christian ministries. How concerned are you when we see 30 people a day being arrested in the UK for making social media posts, very benign social media posts, by the way? I just saw another video. I don't know if I have it up here on my page or not. I might, because I have a lot of things open. But I just saw a video of a gentleman being arrested, and they arrested him in the middle of the night for a very benign social media post. And here it is, actually. Here it is, because I think this, again, is kind of to the point of where I'm going about what are you and I going to be able to say. We'll combine this with a clip from the leader of Australia after the jihadists murdered so many and hurt so many over the weekend. But listen to this.
In terms of that, basically, our hate crime team reviewed it and said there are offences there we need to explore.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the time is 21:31. You're under arrest for what's referred to as Section 19.
Section 19?
I'll explain it in a second. You don't have to say anything, but how many defence you not mention one question, something which relates to a court. Everything you do say may be gain evidence. Basically, Section 19 refers to spreading what we say like racial hatred. So you've posted something online that we believe is spreading racial hatred.
You've said something online that we think is spreading racial hatred. We think may. Listen to the rest.
So Facebook.
I can't explain too much. It's just to give you the context beforehand.
Let me put two in together.
Because I appreciate you've never been arrested before, have you?
Yeah, once or twice.
Once or twice. Apologies.
Frequent flyer.
Apologies, I didn't think you were. Basically, how it works now is then, obviously, if you've got stuff you'd like to gather, obviously I'm more than willing to talk through what you're able to take with you.
What, you're taking me away now?
Yes, so you're under arrest, so you're going to Harrogate, unfortunately.
You're taking me to Harrogate in the middle of the night over a tweet?
I am, unfortunately.
Is this what you signed up the police to do?
This is my role. I'm trying to be reasonable with you here. So if there's stuff you'd like to gather, I'm more than willing to allow you to gather some sort of stuff like medication, if you've got any numbers you need.
May have put something racially troubling. All right, now let's combine that, gentlemen, with what the leader of Australia, the Prime Minister of Australia, just came out to say. Watch and listen, and please pay attention for the word where he references what is the same equivalent of the word pastor or clergy.
Clear we need to do more to combat this evil scourge, much more. As Special Envoy to combat anti-Semitism, Gillian Siegel has delivered a report that sets out further steps we can take. The Australian Government adopts and fully supports the plan to combat anti-Semitism. We'll continue to work through the implementation of the 13 recommendations in consultation with the Jewish community and the Envoy, and of course the first recommendation was the adoption of the IRA definition of anti-Semitism that the Government adopted. Today I'm announcing a significant number of additional actions to build on the plan. Firstly, the Attorney-General and Minister for Home Affairs will develop a package of legislative reforms to crack down on those who spread hate, division and radicalisation. The National Security
Who spread division. Really? Okay.
Committee has agreed that changes will include the following 5 points. Agreed changes will include: 1. Aggravated hate speech offence for preachers and leaders.
Hate speech for preachers, did he just say? Hang on.
Offence for preachers and leaders who promote violence. Second.
Okay, interesting how they just combine speech with violence, Pastor.
Yeah. You know, it's truly amazing. I mean, if you don't think there's a war on the West to destroy our freedoms, you got to be blind, because that's what they're doing. The globalists have to destroy the West. They have to destroy the Judeo-Christian ethics, free speech, freedom of religion, all that. They have to destroy that. And now they're going around through the back end and saying, well, we're not going to limit free speech. We're just going to call certain speech hate speech. And that's what they have done in the UK. And Brandon, just talking to my contacts in the UK and Ireland and other places, dude, they're at the brink of a civil war with these globalist elites and the Islamic immigration that's been going on. And they're using Islam as a battering ram to incite all of this. But anyway, you know, we're foolish to think in America that's not going to touch us. It's hitting all of the West, and it's coming to America real quick. And here's the thing, Brandon. What I have been seeing over the last 5 years, especially with the COVID shutdowns and the mRNA vaccines, is I'm trying to guess, what will the pastors do when they are told that what they say from the pulpit is hate speech? Well, I kind of already know. 75% of the churches failed in the COVID lockdowns. They stayed locked down, took government money, and actually some of them told people to take the vaccine. Well, I already know if the government tells them, hey, you can't be saying this about Islam, you can't be saying this about transgender or LGBT, I already know most of the pastors are going to shut their mouths to begin with. They're going to hide behind the Johnson Amendment and say, well, we can't talk politics. We'll get our tax exemption taken away or whatever they want to do. But Brandon, the churches will fail because they're already cowards in the pulpits. You got JB and myself and and Andy Woods and these guys trying to fight the battle. But dude, the majority of the pastors are totally will follow the government in anything they say. So if this comes to America, and I know it's going to, and look, you're one administration away. Maybe it doesn't happen on Trump's watch, but maybe the next person it does. And they are like, yeah, we got to get rid of this hate speech. It's causing stuff. They're totally going to go after the churches. They're totally going to go after pastors like me and JB and Andy Woods and the rest of them. They're going to silence us because we're the lone voices saying anything. We even have the woke right that won't even say anything. For goodness sakes, Megyn Kelly won't even call out Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson. So if they've got them in the bag, all they have to do is do that to the pastors, and they say, we'll threaten you, take away your church exempt status. Okay, we're done. So Brandon, this is coming here, and if people don't think it is, they got to wake up.
Yeah, it's coming here. Now, I guess it helps us understand a little bit, JB, how those who, after the removal of the church during the tribulation period, who become followers of Christ, how they are being persecuted so fast and even being murdered. You know, the Bible says that they will kill you thinking they're doing service to God. The question is, which God? Is it the God of the state? Is it the God of Antichrist? Is it just simply occultism and the God of this world? Is it Islam's God, the false God of Islam? What God is it that they're serving that they think they're doing a favor for by killing believers? But those who are coming to Christ, Gentiles and Jews, are being murdered so fast. The Bible says one can hardly number how many are becoming believers, but almost as quick as they become believers, they're being killed. Now, they also are being killed by the sword. And I don't know if that implies Islam's growth, but I think we have greatly underestimated the role of Islam before I think it's finally dealt with on a global scale with Ezekiel 38:39, Gog, Magog, and people disagree as to when they think that will occur. But at some point, I think Islam has got such a grip on the planet that there is a lot of Christians being beheaded. What do you say to that?
Yeah, so absolutely, Islam is a key player in the Luciferian game right now, Satan's ultimate agenda to bring down America. We've seen it happen in Europe. Brandon is spot on when he talks about their goal of destroying the West, in particular America. And this is something that I've talked about for many, many years and written about going back to the early 20th century, the Luciferian elite in America. They set out in earnest to dismantle this country. They took over media, education, finance, you name it, the textbook industry, medicine with big pharma, big oil. They took it over all of it. And here we are 125 years later, and we should not be surprised at how much this country is collapsing, culturally. Now, we know that in order for the Luciferians to bring in this one world system, the New World Order, they've got to bring down America. So there has to be some kind of unfreezing event that may or may not happen before the rapture. We don't know. It certainly could happen before the rapture. Nothing says that America's still going to be a sovereign nation at the time the trumpet sounds. But whenever it does happen, there's going to be something that sort of brings America to its knees and in classic Hegelian dialectic form causes us to cry out for a solution. We need somebody to save us from the boogeyman, whether that's Islamic terrorist cells, whether that's an economic crash, whether that's some type of a World War III precursor with, involving Venezuela. And certainly if we go to war with Venezuela, that's going to get China and Russia's attention. So there are a number of ways it could play out, but I think the big picture is clear both in terms of what we see unfolding from the enemy's side and what we see the blueprint of Bible prophecy and Scripture. So absolutely, we're heading towards the fall of America. Interestingly, by the way, we've got on Christmas Eve a special 1-hour show called The Red Green Alliance and the Takeover of America, where I've got a couple of guests on to talk about what you just mentioned, Brandon, the Islamic influence in America. And that's why, by the way, I'll just throw this in and then I'll yield back to you. That's why the church needs to step up, like Brandon said. I mean, the remnant is getting smaller and smaller, which shouldn't surprise us because 2 Timothy 3:13 and other passages tell us that. My latest book, The Great Last Days Apostasy, outlines what I think, and I'd love to get y'all's take on this, is the most forgotten sign of the times. We see all these other signs, technology and wars and rumors of wars and all of that, but apostasy is a pretty big one, 1 Timothy 4:1. And so the church is just failing miserably to do what God has called the church to do in these great last days.
Well, I do think that apostasy is a major indicator. And I think all of us have been warning about that. That's why I wrote the book in 2011, Religious Trojan Horse, then The Coming Religious Reich. That was the follow-up to that. And I had a conversation last night with Naomi Wolf, and she had worked with the Clinton administration and with Al Gore. And she, of course, now said last night, I find myself more comfortable with a lot of my conservative friends because of our stance when it comes to Israel, the Jews, fighting anti-Semitism, and, of course, the COVID shot, the bioweapon, all that. And I've interviewed her so many times, but last night was a very fascinating clip. Logan, do we have that clip? A really fascinating clip I want to play for you real quick, because I think it shows why it is that we have to speak up and speak out as Christians, because there are lots of folks who will agree with us if they just know what it is we're saying, or like was the case last night, she comes from a Jewish heritage, okay? And she couldn't figure out why there were so many so-called Christians and evangelicals coming against Israel, against the Jews, and saying the Jews are not the real Jews. And I explained it to her right on the air. And I want to show this to make the point that this is why we have to point out to people this apostasy in the church, because there are a lot of people that can be added to our voices once they understand what's happening, but that's not traditionally where they come from. They come out of government and campaigns and in pretty high places, but they want to know, they want to learn, and when you give them a piece of the puzzle and the mystery is solved, they're going to join the chorus. And it may come from places you don't expect, people that used to work with Bill Clinton and Al Gore, right? And which is why I have so much respect for her, because she comes from a place where she can reach more people than I can, but she's also gave me the first interview after she wrote an article on why she is such a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. And she said, you're getting the first interview after I wrote that article. She is publicly coming out and saying, oh, look, I've changed my view. Here's why. I mean, you got to love someone that's doing that, right? Watch this clip, because I think it goes to the point of why we have to point out the falling away from traditionally held biblical truths. And I tried explaining to her last night that, D.L. Moody, Billy Graham, Charles Stanley, Adrian Rogers, and we can go way back further than that. People in Christendom, this has been the view of traditional biblical Christianity for, thousands of years. We can go to the early church fathers, despite what John Rich, the country singer, wanted to tell Tucker Carlson, that this was invented in the 1930s. And I went immediately and showed the writings of the early church fathers, from almost immediately the first century. But listen to this, because I hope it'll encourage you the way it did me last night. Listen to this. You have to remember, Martin Luther was quoted 3 times by Hitler in Mein Kampf. But this is my calling in life, has been largely, in one sense, with my many, many books, is calling out the evangelicals because of where they've been going. And one of them is the replacement theology. I'm fighting the anti-Semitism through the theological and eschatological beliefs of the modern church to say, no, God's done with Israel. He's done with the Jews. We don't care about that. We're now the new Israel, the church. I'm like, really? It's funny. You guys want to take all the blessings described in the Old Testament, but you don't want to take any of the curses in the Mosaic covenant. So this is a fight, sadly, that is repeating itself from the 1930s, when the German Christians dissolved their denominations and united under the Reich bishop handpicked by Adolf Hitler for the same reason. They had all bought into the replacement theology. So you and I are, I think, fighting this in different areas, but it's the same fight. Closing comment?
Well, I'm just so grateful to you, because you've solved a mystery that was really haunting me. I keep seeing people online saying these crazy things like, Jews are no longer God's chosen people. You guys blew it, and so now we've replaced you. The church has replaced you. I'm like, that's not theologically accurate in Christianity.
It's not.
And I was wondering where it came from. And so now you're telling me that there's a very dangerous, untrue, inaccurate wave of misinformation, basically, going into American churches.
Pastor Brandon?
Yeah, totally. JB can probably support this. The majority of churches, Brennan, as you know, are replacement theology, man. We are up against a major problem. And here's the thing. Anyone under 45 that goes to a typical church these days in America are taught replacement theology. They're not getting the truth about Israel. So I got people that visit my church, and I'm having to unpack and unwind the mess that's been created by these other pastors and churches about Israel, and flat out, they're why are they God's people, and they're not in belief, they're enemies of the cross. I mean, all this anti-Semitism rhetoric that you hear. And Brendan, it's almost like it's 1938 again, and I'm seeing the confessing church break away from this Nazi regime church that hates Israel. It's absolutely scary. And so guys like me and JB and Sharam and Andy and all those guys, we're fighting the fight, and you are too, but our voices are getting fewer. And the problem is I can't outdo those who are controlling the narrative. I can do my job, but when you get Tucker Carlson up there saying, well, I'm just asking questions. Why is it wrong to ask questions? Well, that way you would be thrown out in a court of law asking questions like that, then insinuate that the Jews killed Charlie Kirk, or the Mossad was attached to Jeffrey Epstein, and saying all kinds of radical things like Candace Owens. And that right there is the problem, Brandon. We're having the major podcasters, the top 5 podcasters in conservative areas are ruling the roost as far as the narrative concerning Israel. And a guy like Nick Fuentes is carrying the water for all these anti-Semite young people. So we got our job cut out for us. We have a lot of work to do, man, because the rally call is now going against Israel, especially among the younger generation.
Very well said. Well, let's talk about this going against Israel and the Jews, because one of Satan's strategies, I think, is one that's been used by the communists, and that's the pincher strategy, or the scissors strategy. And you get two groups going at it, and then you get a group in the middle, and the group in the middle gets squeezed by the two sides, the pincher strategy. And this is happening to the Christians. It's happening to us. You have the left and the right fighting over these issues, and here we are in the center as Christian Zionists, right? And we're getting pinched along with the Jews. So isn't Satan's strategy pretty clever? Because he's taking out two birds with one stone. The Christians and the Christian Zionists and the Jews were being squeezed by either side. And now you have the Prime Minister of Australia saying, as we saw the clip, well, we need to deal with, in the lieu of the murder of people by the Islamists. Well, the answer isn't dealing with Islam. The answer is to crack down on the Christian pastors. You heard him say that. The clergy. So we're going to crack down on them, and we're going to crack down on those involved in anti-Semitism. Now, let me tell you why this is a setup. In my book, The Coming Religious Right from 2015, I quoted Tony Blair. Tony Blair of the Labor Party, the Fabian Socialist Party, the central bank digital currency, everybody should get a digital ID, everybody should get a shot, Tony Blair. Everybody should get a bioweapon shot. That Tony Blair was talking about legislation that would criminalize people that were involved in Holocaust denial. And some of the Jewish leaders and rabbis in Great Britain stepped up and said, look, wait a minute. We don't like Holocaust deniers, but we don't want to see a limit on free speech, because as soon as you limit their free speech, you'll be limiting our free speech. So let us deal with Holocaust deniers in the arena of ideas and debate. Well, what do you see again here? The same card being played that I write about in a 2015 book, which is what, 11 years ago? Where we have 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago. Now we have the Prime Minister of Australia saying we're going to come after those involved in anti-Semitism. Now, when you are arrested for free speech, who can you blame? You can blame the Jews. The Jews, they went around and they criminalized free speech. That's what they're going to say. The Jews were involved in taking over because they're so powerful. They were able to use the courts and the media to make sure that the Jews can say whatever they want and the rest of us get arrested. Now, let me tell you something. That's the lie. That's the pincher strategy. And many of the Jews and the rabbis are not for this strategy. They've already on record saying, don't play that card. because we don't want to be held responsible for the diminishment of free speech, and we don't want the limits on our free speech. But this is the setup. Am I wrong, JB?
Yeah, and so the pincher strategy in politics is called the Overton window. And what they do is they just keep narrowing that window and making acceptable what used to be radically unacceptable. So, and speaking of timeless messages and timeless books like your book from 2015, I had all of my children, we have 6 kids, I had all of them read Naomi Wolf's book, The End of America, which came out, I think, in '07, some 20 years ago. And I don't know if she's a believer or not, but she is spot on so many things. And I'm so glad that you had that dialogue with her, because she's pretty far ahead in terms of where this country is headed, in terms of the Luciferian takeover. But yeah, as far as, Candace Owens and people like that, it goes right back to that Hegelian dialectic we've been talking about, this controlled opposition. Now, I can't prove it, but I'm based on 20 years of studying this stuff, I see a lot of red flags when it comes to people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes. I really do believe they're controlled assets. We may never know this side of glory, but it wouldn't surprise me someday if we look back and they were, in fact, controlled messengers out there to help, steer this ship the way the shadow government wants it to go. And that's why it's so important, by the way. The Bible says in 2 Timothy 3:13, evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. And I think Brandon said earlier, deception, it's getting completely out of hand. It's going to get worse, obviously, after the rapture, during the tribulation, as Jesus warned in the Olivet Discourse. But it's getting worse and worse, the closer we get to the return of the Lord. Paul said those words in 67 AD. That's nearly 2,000 years ago. If it was getting worse and worse then, just imagine how bad it is today. Depravity is a degenerative disease. It does not self-correct. It doesn't get better with time. And so Christians, more than ever before, need to stay in the Word of God, stay rooted in the true north, be able to identify lies. I mean, it's getting harder and harder, especially when you start talking about AI and technology, to differentiate reality from fiction. And yet that's precisely the church's job here, is to proclaim the truth. And of course, the truth is that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, died and rose again for our sins, and he's the only hope for salvation. Not Islam, not the 5 pillars, not the 7 sacraments, not your own good works, not some social club mentality like so many churches around today. Wendy and I, by the way, this past weekend, we were in Dallas, and we had a rare Sunday off. And so for research, we decided to go to one of the leading mega churches of our day in Dallas. I won't mention the name, but let's just say it's been in the news a lot lately with some scandal. And it was worse than I ever could have predicted. I mean, everything from the music to the message. And so I can now say firsthand the kind of stuff that we hear critiquing the megachurch movement. But all of this is not preaching the clear, accurate, and urgent gospel. The only hope is for us to place our faith in Jesus Christ and him alone for salvation, right?
Amen. Pastor Brandon, comment on this. The Jews being set up kind of as the ones that are going to take away our free speech, right? Because you can hear the same voices, someone we mentioned now, saying, oh, look, the Jews want to criminalize those of us on the free speech side of things with anti-Semitism laws. And yet a lot of the rabbis and the Jewish leaders don't want that because they want to preserve their freedom of speech, and they know it's a setup. But isn't Satan clever to do that pincher strategy with the Christians and the Jews right in the middle? Not that all Christians and Jews obviously agree on everything theologically and doctrinally, but there are some core beliefs. Of course, our Messianic Jewish friends, we agree with them on so much. But there is a war on Christians and Jews. We know that. The Islamists are, they're coming after the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. So speak to that setup of the pincher strategy.
Okay, so what's the ultimate goal? Well, the ultimate goal is to discredit the ones in the middle, like you and I and JB, who are fighting for Israel and the theology behind it. So what you have to do is, it's a classic communistic move: identify and then discredit. And so what we're going to be seen as, JB and I and Andy and Sharam and you, Brandon, are going to be seen as we're the Zionist shills that are taking money. I've already been accused of taking money from the Zionist organizations to propagate this whole thing. And I want to say, here's the reality. If the Jews are so in control, how come China controls all the banks? If the Jews are in control of everything, how come it took them like 2,000 years to get back into the land and have their own nation? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But the problem is, Brandon, people want to believe the lies. When you say that the Mossad killed Charlie and it wasn't a shot through the neck, but a beeper from the Mossad, like the beeper things that they did up there in Lebanon, you got to be out of your mind. But what happens is people have a narrative. So this is a psyops. They have a narrative in their head, and they want to believe and blame and scapegoat the Jews, just like Cain wanted to go after Abel for being mad at God. It's the same kind of concept. And so here you and I and JB and the rest of us remnant believers are stuck here in the middle. Dude, I can already tell you, they're going to make us the crazy people. We're the ones that are designing the shields, that are getting paid, and we're troping out the lies. And so they're going to reverse the narrative on us, demonize us, and then, as you have always pointed out in your books, you go from soft persecution to hard persecution. So that's the legal persecution, and then you go to hard persecution, Brandon. And so this goes somewhere with the people in the middle. And where I'm seeing this go is to persecution, legal, and then hard persecution. Brandon, my church is also constantly being attacked by people who hate Israel. We fly Israeli flags along with the American flag. We have it on our digital board, and it gets attacked all the time. We get called the disgusting church on Snow Road because we support Israel, and we get all kinds of junk. So it's already started, Brandon. So the pincer move that's happening is to demonize us, make us subhuman so that eventually they can persecute us.
Dehumanization. Let me switch to
dehumanization.
Let me switch to the economy and headed towards central bank digital currencies, social credit scores, because again, this is the way they're going to, crack down on people who are speaking the truth about Islam, about God's word, the whole 9 yards. I played this on radio today, but I think it bears playing again. The $9 trillion, the Fed's just admitted that the market won't buy $9 trillion of our debt. So the Fed's going to have to buy their own debt. And this, of course, is setting up massive inflation. And President Trump last night, we said, look, we're not carrying that speech unless he is going to actually say something that's worth hearing, not just a speech defending himself and telling us how we're in the age of the golden age and the economy's great and there's no more inflation. I don't buy the CPI numbers. I mean, last month they were telling us that after the shutdown, the Democrats have destroyed those numbers. We may not know what the CPI numbers are for ever again. Now all of a sudden we're being told inflation's down. I don't buy it. Let's wait till next month, see what happens. If he's so adamant that there's no inflation, why is silver and gold at all-time high? Silver over $65. It's not just because of demand for the industrial metal of silver, which is part of it, but the central banks are loading up their vaults with it because they know what's coming. The collapse of the currency, the end of the debt-based system, tokenization's coming. But we also know they're going to have more inflation if your government keeps printing money and buying your own debt. Last night, he announces checks going to the military for $1,776. Okay, why? Why the military? Why not every American? Okay, people, God bless them, that sign up for the military. But you know what the deal is and you know what the paycheck is. And if you don't like the pay, don't sign up. So don't tell me that the military should get special checks ahead of the people that are paying the taxes that provide for those checks. Okay? So that doesn't make me against the military. I think everybody deserves tax cuts. Nobody needs checks. We need tax cuts massively. I appreciate the ones we've gotten with the help of President Trump, but we need the end of the IRS, okay? We need the end of this group and all of our problems that started with the Federal Reserve in 1913 and then the IRS and all they've done to use that to weaponize the government against us, the American people, enslave us, take our money, give it to NGOs, non-government organizations, and then allow for the massive money laundering that has enriched the power elite in Washington, those in front of the curtain and those behind, and then, of course, allows for Somalis and illegals to come in here and then game the system, for Pete's sake, to the tune of trillions of dollars that you and I pay for and the listeners pay for because we get up every day and go to work and pay these unconstitutional taxes. Now, Donald Trump wants to stand there last night and try to defend his economy and inflation. Why? Are you telling me, are you going to, it's bad branding, because you cannot put the genie back in the bottle. And you're going to be known for the guy there's no inflation, there's no inflation, there's no inflation. Anyone that tells you that's crazy, you really going to set yourself up for that. You're setting yourself up for failure, because what you should be saying is, we have a huge problem. We have too much government spending. I tried getting it under control with Doge. We're still trying, but we have a huge problem with too much debt. We're paying too much in interest payments on the debt. Yes, we have massive inflation, and there have been a lot of presidents responsible for this, but it all started in 1913, largely with the creation of the Federal Reserve. And so, yes, I'm working on it, but it may get worse before it gets better. Why would you not protect your own reputation instead of doubling down on no inflation? Because I'm telling you, there is going to continue to be inflation, because you can't help but have it when your whole system is based on propping it up with more and more money. Listen to this clip by Dr. Peter St. I don't know how you say his name. Is it Oneg? I don't know how you say his name. I need to learn, guys, because he puts out some good stuff. But listen to this.
The Federal Reserve just announced it's unleashing the money printers to finance a $9 trillion wall of federal debt coming due this year. As in, markets won't buy it, so the Fed will with counterfeit money. This is where the Fed types zeros on Excel sheets in the basement, declares their dollars like any good counterfeiter, then uses those fake dollars to buy government debt called quantitative easing, or QE. Jerome Powell said the Fed's kicking off with $40 billion a month, which is a $500 billion per year, lovingly printed straight out of your wallet. Now, this is concerning, because the last time the Fed did this, in the 1940s, to finance World War II, it sent inflation into the double digits. At one point in 1947, annual inflation was 20%. In fact, it's how Weimar Germany got to hyperinflation and wheelbarrows of money, because once the central bank starts printing the deficit with inflation, it's very tempting to make that deficit very big. After all, there's a lot of special interests to feed in Washington, a trillion here, trillion there. Soon it is real money. What's even more concerning is that in the 1940s, it was just about financing government debt. Today, the Fed needs to pump hundreds of billions just to sustain a financial sector that has ballooned to nearly 5 times GDP. The Fed literally admitted this, with Jerome Powell claiming that this is not real QE, which everybody knows is inflationary. This, in fact, is necessary to maintain, quote, ample reserves so the Fed can maintain control of interest rates. In other words, the financial system breaks unless the Fed keeps a full plate of cocaine, or inflation, by the bar. The Fed knows this because markets cracked both times the Fed tried draining QE. There was the so-called taper tantrum in 2013, and then another one again in 2019, just before COVID, when interbank rates spiked to double digits. In both cases, the Fed got back to printing toot sweet, bringing us to so far $5.5 trillion of freshly printed QE since the 2008 crisis, which is almost as many dollars as existed in 2008. So what's next brought to you.
All right. So, guys, it seems as though we're going to have more inflation. The dollar has to go away. We're going to have to go to a new system. It will involve tokenization, I think. It will involve central bank digital currencies. They're going to be the big government, big business, tech bros, public-private partnerships, communitarianism, whatever you want to call it, corporate fascism. And, of course, this will be slided in with the social credit scores of China. And I guess Palantir, perhaps, building a file in every American. And again, we're off to the races where you thought we saw deplatforming and shadow banning and problems during COVID. And the Biden years, we ain't seen nothing yet, Pastor Brandon.
No, we have not. And I call this a controlled destruction of the economy. And whether you want to use the old term of Cloward and Pivens, where you just break the whole system and overwhelm the system to where it finally breaks and say, oh, shucks, sorry, guys, we got to go switch to a new system, digital currency that's programmable, like you're mentioning. And I think that's what the intent is, because look, there's no relief in sight. And I read article after article, Brandon. And so I'm looking at this from not just an economic standpoint, from a pastoral standpoint. You know what's happening because people can't find jobs is the anxiety, suicide rates are skyrocketing because of the economy. And so if you really cared about the American people, you would care about their mental state and what an economy like ours is doing to people. It's destroying them. And so that's why the suicide rates are going up. I saw another article. A high number of Americans making over $100,000, Brandon, are now skipping meals and putting off medical care because of the high cost of living in America. That's insane. What is happening here? Does Trump not see that? Does the government not see that? They don't care. We're facing a tourism industry collapse is another article. Unprecedented explosion of the price of silver, like you mentioned, is going off the chain. I mean, it's unbelievable. And think about it. If you're making six figures, they're saying you're barely making it. Well, here in California, if you're making six figures, you are barely making it in California. It's so expensive to live here. It's a two-income state, Brandon. And that's why everyone's leaving it, because it's a controlled demolition of even the economy here in California. All the big businesses are leaving. And basically, what do you end up with? A welfare state. And then the elites in Silicon Valley are controlling everything. They're the only ones that have the money. And dude, it's just like when the book of Revelation says, of course, in the tribulation, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, 3 quarts barley for a day's wages, but don't harm the oil and the wine, which means that everyone else will be broke, but the elites will have it all. That's where we're heading. And Donald Trump's not doing anything to stop this.
Yeah, I don't, Brandon, I don't think there's anything that can be done to stop it. It's like the car has already crashed through the guardrail. It's, crashing over the cliff headed towards the ground, and you're not going to just be able to throw it in reverse and get back up on the road. As far as Trump's speech last night, I just think they're buying time. I think that's what it is. In my view, based on my research, I think the powers that be, what they call themselves Luciferians, we're already on life support as an American economy. They're just waiting for the opportune time to call time of death, and it's going to be part of a cumulative effort to bring down this country. But as you said, Brandon, going all the way back to 1913, all the roads for the economic problems in this country go back to Jekyll Island. A lot of people don't realize that the Fed is quite happy to keep doing QE3, QE4, QE5, because every time we print money, the private owners of the Federal Reserve get money. That's why it's called a Federal Reserve note. If you look on any bill that says Federal Reserve note, it's a debt instrument. And so when the American government prints money, they're paying interest to print that money to the privately owned Federal Reserve. So I think it's all smoke and mirrors. Obviously, a lot of people are really hurting, as Brandon pointed out. We see it in our church. We started several months ago a food pantry once a month. It's been off the rails in our little community up in south of Denver. We've had as many as 120 to 150 people show up to get food. We run out of food every time. There's a lot of pain. And I have adult children. I don't know how adults, these days, young adults could ever afford to buy a house or to live. It's a different day. So it's cake and circus. They're trying to entertain us with a lot of the right-left debates and the pincher technique, as we've talked about. But behind the scenes, there's a real crack in the armor here of the U.S. economy.
And when do you think the timeline is? Do either of you have an idea? Is 2026 going to be the year? Are they going to make 2030? By 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. We know that the occultist Alice Bailey, who's known as the mother of the New Age movement, who consulted a demon, she said that she died in, I think, 1949. But and by the way, just to remind listeners, she had a publishing company called Lucifer Publishing, and their own website admits that was the name at one time, changed it to Lucis Trust. I have the screenshot to prove it. But she was consulting a demon known as the Tibetan. They wrote 10,000 pages together. She said the outline, the external of the hierarchy, she wrote that the outline of the New World Order would come into form. You start to see the outline of it by 2025. And she died, I think, in 1949. So this is pretty interesting. Yeah. So what do you think, JB, 2026, what do you see between now and 2030? 30, and particularly with the midterms coming up?
Well, obviously the Luciferian elite haven't chosen to loop me in on their timetable, but I wish they would. But and God, of course, we all know, is the ultimate arbiter of the timetable. So even though the enemy has a blueprint and a game plan, doesn't mean it's going to happen. But you're exactly right. In my book, Spirit of the Antichrist, Volume 2, I had a whole chapter on 2025, and 15 times Alice Bailey references that year in 10,000 pages of writings in which she channeled the demon Master DK, as she called him. So something about this decade is pretty significant to the elites. You've got, going back to 92, you've got Agenda 21 in Rio, then you've got in 2015 Agenda 2030. They've been laying the groundwork. I believe that's why the pre-planned, let's just call it the COVID crisis, we won't use other words for it, but I think your audience is well aware of what was going on there. It was started to kick off the 2020s. It laid the groundwork in a lot of ways, and then you've got, of course, all the whole AI movement and the burgeoning technocracy. There's a lot happening. As far as the timetable, it certainly wouldn't surprise me if we see something happen between now and the end of the decade that really changes life as we know it in America. My hope and prayer, and I know all of yours is as well, is that the trumpet sounds and we're called home, and that God's end times plan begins to shift into place. But we better be prepared, Brandon, because as you all know, we don't know the timetable, and we're not guaranteed we won't suffer. In fact, Christians have suffered horrifically for 2,000 years of church history. We've been largely shielded from that in this great country of ours, with God's fingerprints all over it. But we're not entitled to not suffer. And so if the Lord tarries, we could see incredible hardship and persecution. You've talked a lot about, some of the persecution in Europe. Well, what happens when they come for us here? What happens when they come for Brandon for speaking the truth in Bakersfield, or you, Brandon, for speaking the truth over the airwaves and in Branson? So, timetable, I think it could be soon, but we better prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Let's turn to Europe real quick again. Here are the farmers. They're out in front of the European Union headquarters in Brussels. I think there's like 10,000 of them that have showed up out there. Look at this. We'll pull the music down just so we can look at the images. I mean, these guys are not fooling around. They've had it. And this kind of goes back to where we were before, which is a collapse of societies realizing there is no human solution. You can keep changing horses, but at the end of the day, the horses are all coming out of the same barn, fed by the same people, shoed by the same people, and, groomed and bred and born by the same group of people. It may be different horses, but they all come from the same barn. I don't know a better analogy, but this is, again, what people like G. Edward Griffin, who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, who's in his 90s now, this is what he was been saying. He was saying this for so many years. There's no difference. There's no difference in any of these and these parties. And, you almost don't want to believe that because you're running out of hope here. But I think Donald Trump is now proven there's not a whole lot of difference. Yes, he is different in some ways, no doubt about it. But when you're dragging Bill Gates into the White House and you're dragging in Mark Zuckerberg and Palantir and Sam Altman and all these guys, you're like, wait a minute, is this really different? Okay, so one guy might be more of a socialist, the other guy might be more of a communitarian, but at the end of the day, aren't we going the same direction, Pastor Brandon?
Yeah, it's just a different package with different wrapping, but it's the same. It's the same stuff, man. It never changes, and it continues to show you. I think it was what George Bush the Jr. that said, it doesn't matter who's in this White House, they will do exactly what they're told. And I think that's what
George W. told. Reportedly, Glenn Beck says he was called in to the George W. Oval Office and lectured and said, the next guy that sits behind this desk will get the same orders from the same people I get orders from. That's what Glenn Beck, I think you're citing that Glenn Beck statement.
Yeah, I think that's where I heard that. And I thought, yeah, that's true because, okay, so you mentioned Europe and you're showing these farmers and, it's food, energy, economy is how they control people. So I asked a lot of the guys that I know in the UK, Ireland, different places in Europe, and I said, tell me what your elites think about your country. How come they're selling out your country? How come How come they're bringing mass immigration and they're destroying farming and they're destroying everything, energy, for saving the planet, so to speak. And they go, Brandon, here's what you don't understand in America. Our elites hate us. They hate our culture. They are globally loyal to the UN, Klaus Schwab, and those types of organizations than they are to their own countries. And they go, Brandon, that's why they sell us out. That's why they bring in mass immigration. And so, Brandon, we're looking at an elite structure, at least in Europe, and I would say partly in America as well, and it's slowly becoming all of America, a uniparty, to where our elites are selling us out. That's why we're not coming back. I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but that's the reality. We're not coming back because the elites think that globalism is the answer. They think digital currency, all this other stuff is the answer. You ask the average European that doesn't have any biblical background whatsoever, and they're like, oh yeah, man, going global, having a digital currency, that would be easy, that would be great, it'd be convenient. And they've already been brainwashed to accept this. And so the social conditioning that's been going on for decades, Brandon, has now caught up to where when they introduce it, it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be a problem. So unfortunately, I hate to be negative, but this is the way it's going.
All right. So this brings us, as we get ready to wrap, to another topic, and that is to Venezuela. What is going to happen to America? We don't see America listed in the end times. We see Iran, Turkey, Russia. We have so many nations, obviously Israel, Syria. There's so many nations we could list off, but we see these nations, if you go back to the old table of nations, and their names then and their names now, you can figure out real quick what we're talking about. Of course, Iran was split, so you could have Persia and see what is today these nations. But America's not mentioned. Now, some try to make America out, America's the eagle, America's this. I'm like, okay, it's what we're talking about specific names of nations. We see them there. America's not specifically named. Have we been absorbed into the New World Order? Are we part of the 10 Federation, the 10 leaders overseeing the world and give their power to the Antichrist, like a North American Union? Okay, then we might be part of that, but we're not named. And now you see that our enemies are in our backyard. Not only that, they're in our country. They're the terror cells. They're here. Joe Kent, who I've had the chance to interview in person and via technology, just told Congress there are terror cells here. We know it. He went into detail. We played the clip this week. We know that Mexico is in a strong relationship with China and the CCP. But we also know and have known for a long time that in Venezuela, you have Russia, China, Iran, Hezbollah. And so we don't know what's going on there. And that's why I wished last night President Trump would have talked about that and talked about the blockade and that Russia and China, Iran and Hezbollah are in Venezuela, that they're in our backyard. And we don't know if they don't have missiles. Talk about a Cuban missile crisis. We've been warning since about 2008, 2009 about a Venezuelan missile crisis. Missiles in northern Venezuela, 1,264 miles as the crow flies to Miami. Speak to that, JB. You don't see America mentioned. And how concerned are you that America could find itself in a very big kinetic war? Not to mention, we just gave $11 billion. Is that what I read today? $11 billion to Taiwan. So are we going to get involved in something with China over Taiwan? Are we going to be involved in fighting the groups right here in our hemisphere? Gordon Chang says, Americans, the next war will be fought on our own soil. Gordon Chang has been telling that to our audience now for a couple of years. Tell me what your thoughts are from your study.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, God is fully capable in his word of identifying nations that play a role in the end times. Turkey, Russia, Syria, Israel, all these nations. If God intended for America to play a key role in end times prophecy, he could have very clearly explained it in scripture. So all of this allegorizing and trying to come up with some secret hidden code that puts America there, I just don't see it. And that coupled with the fact that the Luciferians have been talking about the downfall of America for some time now. They know it's the one thing standing in their way. today because of God's fingerprints all over this country, tells me that, we are headed kind of off the stage, so to speak. Now, how does that happen? I think it's very possible that a kinetic war could, in fact, be one of the weapons in their arsenal. A lot of people have been predicting this for a long time. Going back 100 years, have talked about how, after World War II especially, that, this superpower is going to have to be brought to its knees. And so I was kind of expecting last night, Tucker put out that misinformation that Trump was going to talk about going to war with Venezuela. Tucker, of course, is a master of misinformation. So it turned out not to be true. But I was, like you, Brennan, hoping that he would address this because it's sort of the elephant in the room, which my read on it is that's by design. They're sort of giving just enough media coverage to it to put it in the stream of consciousness of most Americans. But it's quite possible that some unfreezing event could happen that provokes America or provokes Russia or China or Venezuela, whoever, into this conflagration in our hemisphere, as you said. And then it doesn't take long for that spark to become a global battle of some kind. So, yeah, I think it's a real serious piece of the puzzle, that with the economy, with other terrorist cells, with other things that could happen as a cumulative case to bring down America.
Let me look at your the cover of your book, Spirit of the Antichrist, The Gathering Cloud of Deception, Volume 2. Do you have a short list of people you think are the Antichrist?
Well, I believe that the devil knows. I think the devil, who is not omniscient, of course, has his man of the hour on standby in every age. And I think he's especially been propping up his candidates since Israel reemerged after World War II, because he knows the Bible better than most Christians. He just doesn't believe it. He's self-deceived. And so he knows that Israel plays a key role in God's end times plan. Ultimately, Christ will reign from the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. So the minute Israel kind of came back on our maps, I think he really ramped it up. And so I think he knows candidates. I don't think he's going to be Jewish. I think we've talked about that before on your show. I think the false prophet quite likely is Jewish, but not the Antichrist.
I agree with both of those.
Yeah, the Antiochus Epiphanes analogy really wouldn't make sense from Daniel 8 if indeed the Antichrist was Jewish. So, yeah, I mean, there's some candidates out there. My best guess, this is totally speculation, is that he is in a position of some leadership today. He may not be prominent. He may not be a who's who type of person in that list. But he's the kind of person that people would know if you mentioned him. And I think as things evolve, whether before the rapture or certainly after the rapture, in that gap of time between the rapture and the signing of the confirming of the covenant, he's going to rise to prominence, and then he will somehow deceive the world into coming on board his system.
Some have said for a long time, Joan Vion, I think, had King Charles, Prince Charles, I think was one of her shortlist people for a long time. I don't see that today. I think at one time, his son, Prince William, seems like he's a pretty big radical. I mean, he seems pretty radical. I just watched his speech at COP30. So, I would put him on the short list. For a long time, I thought Emmanuel Macron could be on the short list. Again, I'm not saying these people are. I'm just saying if I were looking at people's worldviews, I would say these people. But you think it's actually someone whose name we would recognize right now, JB, huh?
I do. And I think all those people you mentioned, they check a lot of boxes for sure. I'd love to get Brandon's take on this because he's certainly studied this as well. But yeah, all those people, they check a lot of boxes. But I do think it's going to have to be someone that is very cunning, and then someone that would get the apostate church also to sign on, because, the church.
Well, what if you're the king and you're the head of the church? Quote, church.
Well, the Catholic Church.
Yeah, no,
I don't just mean Roman Catholicism.
I know. I'm just talking if you're the head of a church and you're the king of, Prince Harry, William, who becomes the king, you're already kind of tied into a religious system, and you're coming out of Europe, a Eurocentric world government. I mean, there's many reasons I put some of those guys on the short list. It's also dealing with their line and their place on the planet.
No, I just think evangelicals is what I'm talking about. Apostate evangelicals that fill up our pews every week and they don't really know the Lord as their Savior. They're already sort of have a sort of aversion to Roman Catholicism. So it's got to be someone that is a pluralist that can really bring everybody under one tent. But certainly, those candidates, even, King Charles, like you mentioned, would be a great candidate.
Brandon, I know we're just theories and spitballing here, but what are your thoughts?
You take some of the cues you get from Daniel. Number one, he's involved in the occult. He knows dark secrets and stuff like that. The other thing you realize is Daniel says he's a man of war. He worships the god of fortresses. So he doesn't have a typical religious background of his fathers, it says, but he worships war. So he either has to be very, very wealthy to be able to do war or threaten it. And again, the threaten would come from the bow that has no arrow in it. He's threatening war, but he doesn't have an arrow in that bow. So somehow he has enough money to garner enough military support to threaten, but he never pulls a trigger or something like that. So it would have to be someone that has that kind of backing. He can't be poor, that's for sure. You've got to have some type of, you got to be a billionaire, basically, is what I'm thinking. And if that box is checked, then great. And then the other thing about it is he's from the genetic line of the Romans. And so if you look at someone's ancestry, that you have to be able to trace that, because some people were saying, well, Trump's the Antichrist. Well, if you trace his ancestry, it doesn't trace down to Roman ancestry. But so you would have to be able to narrow it down to a Roman ancestry for this individual. It can't be a woman. We know that. It's got to be a man. And so, with those clues, you start looking for someone that kind of fits that criteria. But the problem is you won't know until the rapture happens. And then the man of lawlessness is revealed. So we're taking guesses. But yeah, guys have mentioned Prince Charles. People mentioned Obama and stuff like that. But the thing is, where I'm looking at is he's not going to come from China. He's not going to come from India. He's going to come from Europe. And that's my idea, that he comes from a European base, more of an Italian, more of a Roman ancestry. So we're not looking at Greenland or Scandinavia for this guy to come. We're looking, in that area of where the Roman Empire was. And so, we can speculate. I believe he's alive today. If we're in the last days, Satan has got a guy prepped. And here's the thing. At some point, just like Satan offered the kingdoms to Jesus in his temptation, and remember, obviously, we remember that from the three temptations, Satan will again offer those kingdoms to this individual and say, if you will bow down to me, I will give you these kingdoms. And that guy will make a deal. And he will accept that offer, and Satan will work through him, obviously, to control the whole world for a brief period of time.
All right, guys. So closing comment. Thank you for being with us tonight. I know we're going to get a ton of feedback. People saying, do this again, do more of this. Closing comment from you first, JB.
Yeah, I think 2025 has been a pivotal year, but it's all been sort of just under the radar. We haven't had any huge, major types of things happen like maybe some people were expecting. But there has been a lot of movement in putting together the infrastructure to pave the way for the one world system. And so I think, don't rest on your laurels. Now is the time for believers to be alert and awake and not asleep. 1 Thessalonians 5:6. We obviously want to be urgent about the gospel. We've already talked about that. We want to be prepared because, again, the Lord's got the timetable. And if he waits, and he already knows when he's going to come back, I'm not suggesting he's up there trying to decide. But from our perspective, if he doesn't come soon, we could be in for some rough sledding. And so the Proverbs 22:3 says the wise person sees trouble coming and prepares for it. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway, for this year in 2025 would be the AI and the technocracy and all of those things would be at the top of my list.
Yeah.
And you, Pastor Brandon.
Yeah, I would add to that. I agree with JB. Well, I'm going to add this about the church. I call it the revealing of God. He is separating the wheat and the chaff, and he's doing it through issues, whether that's Israel, COVID lockdowns, the jabs, Charlie Kirk, or whatever. And it's these hot button issues, Brandon, that he is using to separate out. And so we can clearly see who's part of the remnant Philadelphia element and who's part of Laodicea, who's part of the tares and who's part of the wheat. And it's just like in that parable the Lord gave about the wheat and the tares. Separate them at the harvest. Well, you know, the interesting thing about a tare versus a wheat at the harvest, a tare turns this greenish gray color and the wheat bows in submission in this golden color. And you can only tell the difference at harvest time. And I think because we're in the last days at harvest time, it's clear we're starting to see the wheat and the tares. When you have a transgender pastor up there pastoring the church, I think I can spot that. So God is revealing. I think he's going to do more revealing in the days ahead.
Wow. Amen. Here we go. Spirit of the Antichrist by J.B. Hixson. It's a 2-part series. I think he also has one on the false prophet. You can pick those up on Amazon. And Pastor Brandon, do you have anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I got a new book called Eternal Rewards. It's just come out. It's about the 5 crowns, the rewards that believers get for persevering and gutting it out and doing what you're doing, Brandon, doing what JB's doing, you know, in the trenches, contending for the faith. Hey, not all Christians get rewarded. Some will lose rewards at the Bema seat, but some Christians will get that reward. So I talk about that, about the 5 crowns. So that's a new book. Pick it up on Amazon or any bookseller.
Excellent. Guys, thank you so much. Let's do this more often in 2026, please.
You betcha.
Amen. Love to. Thank you, Brandon.
Let's plan on it. I know we're going to get a lot of response. Thank you, guys. Folks, do you appreciate what we're doing here? Look at that. We went the whole interview there. We didn't stop for commercial break. We could have stopped and sold stuff. Too important. We want to keep your attention and keep it moving. But I do have to stop right now and say, do you appreciate that kind of programming? If so, we need to hear from you, particularly with your end of the year giving. Thank you to all of you that are supporting us, have supported us through 2025. And thank you to those of you who are going to, because I know there are many of you right now that are going to go online and or go to the website and find our mailing address and send a check through the mail. So thank you for doing that. You can also use that phone number on the screen. Call Melissa, leave her a voicemail, text her. She'll get back to you, help you make that contribution over the phone. WorldviewFoundation.com. If you make a contribution, we'll send you a tax receipt with our EIN number by the end of January 2026. Our foundation is a church. We bring you a church service on Sunday nights, as you very well know. And we are here to push out free ministry programming. And our foundation helps us here at the network to come along and push out lots of programming for free. Otherwise, we would have to say, well, we got to generate revenue to pay for all of the thousands upon tens of thousands of dollars a month. We better put it all behind a paywall, or we'll stream it free, but in 24 hours or less, it goes right behind a paywall. We could do that. We could have the stream out for free, and then immediately all the replays are behind a paywall. But not only do we stream it for free, we then put it back out on the website for at least 7 days for people to watch for free, because our foundation comes along and says, let us help with some of that cost to push it out as broadcast ministry and education. So if you appreciate that, thank you for your support as our foundation strives to use the media, print, audio, radio, television, our Roku channel, and all the other platforms as a medium by which to use to get out the truth, to help people understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. So thank you for your support now at worldviewfoundation.com. And again, I want to thank all of you that are supporting us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I never want to neglect thanking those of you that faithfully support us. It's one thing to ask for support, but it's very important to thank those that keep the support coming, that are so faithful to us. Thank you for trusting us, for investing in this broadcast outlet, ministry, work, and programming work. And again, all I can say is thank you so very much for that. Worldviewfoundation.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. Worldviewfoundation.com. Worldviewfoundation.com. My new book on why I'm a Christian Zionist should be in the vault before the year is over. And if not, it'll be there right after the first of the year. And then my book on Revelation, the full commentary on Revelation right after the first of the year. A lot of great content coming your way. So again, I hope you'll join the vault as well as support us through the foundation. 2 powerful ways to support us through the vault, worldviewtube.com/vault and worldviewfoundation.com. On behalf of the team in the control room and Dolly, may God save America. Take care.